relief at the start of the meeting, so here.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is a public meeting of the School Board of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to the meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors at the Education Service Center and at the West Bend Community Memorial Library. A copy was also sent to the Daily News, WIBD, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. And ask our superintendent to confirm that this meeting was properly posted.
Yes, it was.
Great, thank you. I invite you to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We recognize a quorum of our board present. We have 6 members present. Tani Schmidt is excused absent, and Aaron Dove is joining us via telephone. And so, as a result, I'll be utilizing roll calls as we go through our various votes. Just didn't want any of the board members to be surprised. So, next is the approval of our agenda. The agenda was circulated in advance. I would move for approval of the agenda. Is there a second? Thank you, Nancy. Motion and second to approve the agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Rebholz?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt is absent. Ms. Justman?
Yes.
Mr. Ongert?
Yes.
Mr. Swigert votes yes. And Ms. Dove?
Yes.
Yes. Excellent. That motion passes. All right. We're on to public participation. I have one public participation comment card from Mr. Cameron Merkel. And so, Cameron, I'm going to invite you up to the podium. Are there any other comment cards or anyone else who wishes to address the board? Mr. Merkel, I'm going to, if it's all right with the board, waive the reading of Policy 187. So you have 3 minutes to speak. I can read the policy if you would like, but I know you've addressed our group before, and so I think you're familiar with it. So,
look at you guys.
all right, perfect. Please go ahead.
All right.
Welcome.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. A lot has happened between board meetings, but I'd first like to say that I'm pleased with all the work that the district has been putting in. After going through the presentations at the last meeting, I'm excited to see how the high school looks after all the projects are completed. However, I'm here to bring 2 major issues to your attention. First, I wanted to address the heating in the high school. A teacher of mine told me the legal requirement of how warm it is in a public school classroom had to have a minimum temperature of anywhere between 58 to 60 degrees. Now, I could be wrong because I have not checked that, but even so, during the first winter weather advisory we had this January, it was as cold as 51 degrees in my math class, and I know a science classroom next to mine went as low as 49 degrees. Now, nobody can focus during that because of how cold it is and how cold the desks get, and so it's really hard to focus. Now, this heating issue needs to be a top priority. My second topic is the high school exams. As you know, high school students had exams on the 12th, 13th, and 14th of January, and now many feel that they were a disaster. Students were given an exam schedule that had resource time taken out and replaced with 2 extra minutes to each class and 8-minute passing periods. After looking it over, I was appalled at what I saw. There were not any pre-selected times where we would have different exams. To combat that, teachers tried giving exams during any day of the week to try to avoid students from being stressed out as best they could. Now, that way students were not potentially left with all their exams on one day. Do you know how stressful it is to have all your exams in one day? Also, what are we supposed to do with 2 extra minutes? Have 1 extra question on the test? Furthermore, we should talk about the 8-minute passing periods, which nobody knows what to do during that time. The administration could have just left the regular day-to-day schedules, for God's sakes. Now, you're probably asking yourself why I'm here complaining about this. I'm here because I have friends who were crying due to being stressed out. I'm here because I had to take a day just for myself to catch up on work that I had been assigned that Monday. I'm here because this will not happen again. When I met with the West principal, Mr. Schloss, he told me that we did not have enough minutes to have regular exam schedules as we did in the 2019 to 2020 year, the first semester exams. You can change whatever you like. Students and teachers do not care what you have to do to make sure we get our exam schedules back. My friends, peers, and I were anxious and upset during this time, and teachers are having less time to grade projects or papers, which is causing them stress too. During first semester exams in early 2020, we had plenty of time to study, eat, or drink, or just simply to rest. This year, we were not given enough time to study at all. Most students were unaware of when their exams would be taken until that Tuesday. Please fix this. The board needs to take emergency action on this issue by the end of the school year and before our next exams for this second semester. We do not want to stress over all this again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and for bringing that up. Superintendent Wimmer, I think we may have some follow-up items from that. Great.
Yep, will do.
Thank you. All right. All right, we will then move to the consent agenda. And on our consent agenda tonight, we have a number of items. Minutes of the January 10th, 2022 regular board meeting and executive session. An update of the memorandum of understanding with the West Bend Police Department. Ratification of 2 certified staff contracts. Ratification of administrator contracts. 1 certified staff resignation and 1 retirement to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Paul. Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any final discussion?
I just want to maybe clarify a point in this consent agenda that we fund 4 resource officers, and that's part of the consent agenda. We contribute to the resource officers. There's 2 $90,000 payments that we're making, so $180,000 contributing to the 4 resource officers at school. I just want to point it out. We appreciate the West Bend Police Department in our schools and their efforts, because I know the city funds a good portion of that as well, but we contribute and fund it, and I just wanted to just make people aware of that. So I'm going to vote yes.
Great. Thank you, Kurt. Any additional discussion? All right. Hearing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Zweigert votes yes. Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Dove?
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt is absent. Mr. Repholz?
Yes.
Ms. Justman?
Yes.
Mr. Ongert?
Yes.
All right. That motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to our reports. And Superintendent Wimmer, the superintendent's report, please. Good evening.
Thank you. Just wanted to update you. We've been working, I've been working on behalf of Washington County Superintendents with the county itself on interagency collaboration, certainly COVID absences, et cetera. Just looking at how across agencies we could provide mutual aid to each other should we ever need it, not just in this case, but if something should occur in the future. So it's nice to be over-prepared on something that you don't need. So just our thanks to the county for sending their team to the table to collaborate and have those conversations. So I appreciate that. And just for that perspective, you know, as we've been watching numbers and everything very carefully, we finally started to see kind of a dip in absences to the positive for both students and staff. Prior to that, we were running at about 85% staffed, on some days as high as 90 absences with up to 30 unfilled a day. So I cannot thank our staff, all staff, whether it's teachers in the classroom, anyone supporting in any manner or working in facilities. It stretched the capacity of our staff and continues to do so at every level. Things might look different, things might be delivered by a different teacher, you know, we might be doing some Google Meets or some things different, but again, just that shared understanding that, you know, that capacity has been stretched, and I just applaud the efforts of everyone and what they've been doing to maintain our schools being open during this stretch. So I really appreciate that. Just a reminder to our families that this morning a voluntary testing site for students and their family members opened in the former Jackson Fire Department building on Jackson Drive, just south of our elementary school there. So that testing is completed by Summit Labs. It's sent to the state for actual testing. It's open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., and it's made possible by a state grant. So just a reminder, that's open to all our families and students should they need to use it. And that started today. Also, a reminder that 4K enrollment is starting, so we're starting to look to next year's class of 4K. So go ahead and visit us online, check that out, or you can always call our registrar, Carol, here in the office to help you navigate that process. So we're looking forward to those numbers. Our high school recently put out a video for current 8th graders and their families. It's called Gearing Up for High School. So our future East or West High School 9th graders can learn some tips from staff and other students how to be successful in high school. They also have made a folder available with all their class sign-up information and more. So I would urge you, if you haven't already done so, to check that out, whether you're an 8th grader currently or maybe looking a few years ahead to the high school to check it out. And congratulations, you heard this name before, but Courtney Rummel actually made the Olympic team, so congratulations to our West Bend West student. She will be representing the United States in snowboarding in the Winter Olympics. She leaves for Beijing on Thursday. We're really proud of her accomplishments, and her representation for not just West Bend, but our country. So good luck to Courtney as she competes. Those are my updates.
All right. Any questions for the superintendent? Paul?
Superintendent, just following up on the COVID conversations with the county. 2 weeks ago, you had projected that, they were saying that they didn't feel that the top of the wave had hit yet. Any update on where they think we are? Are they seeing a corresponding negative, positive downward trend, I guess?
Sure. So they were looking, we meet in several groups with Children's Hospital. They were the ones kind of looking at that overall peak. Hopefully, if numbers stay true, again, it's just one data point. We're watching the next couple days to see if we hold on the decline and if we've hopefully peaked and on our way back down and to some better attendance and healthy students and staff. So if you look at county data, we sometimes fall in line with that, and it seems to be mirroring those trends. But again, we're looking for a few more data points before we think we're onto a trend here.
Any other questions? Thank you for your report. We'll move on to, we have 2 discussion items on our agenda tonight, and the first is summer programming recommendations. And Aaron Faust, the program administrator, I believe is going to walk us through that. Good evening.
All right, as I was introduced, my name is Erin Faust, and I am the program administrator for the curriculum department, which means I oversee the West Bend Virtual Academy, and I also oversee the summer school program, which is what we will talk about tonight. So at the end of last summer school, we sent out a survey to all of our district families and all of our district staff members. So whether or not they participated in summer school as a staff member or a family, we wanted to have some input for 2 reasons. For looking at our continuous improvement of the program, but also looking at, based on the data that you're seeing right here, our numbers and our enrollment had historically been very, very strong, and they were growing prior to the COVID pandemic. Last year, with moving back to full face-to-face, we had anticipated a little bit higher numbers in our enrollment, and they didn't come back and rebound as we had hoped. So we wanted to find out if there were other factors beyond COVID that were sort of hindering families from sending their children to summer school. If you look at this data, so that you know what you're seeing, the total number of courses taken over the past 5 years is what's in this first column. So we had gotten up to as high as 3,722 courses. And then last year we had seen a slight rebound from our COVID year to the 1,000, almost 1,350 courses. Students could take at that time up to 2 courses per student each summer. If you move across the columns, it breaks it down by age group. We had been as high as about 750 at our high school, and then we had gotten over the 800 mark at both our middle and our elementary schools at one time. So we'd like to see those numbers rebound because summer school is a wonderful opportunity for our students, both to practice skills and to enhance skills. The very last column talks about the FTE count. We have, because summer school isn't a full-time, full-day program, in order to report to the state, there is a percentage indicator that we multiply out the number of enrollments, the number of students. So that's just what that last column means. And again, you can see we had been growing. We had our COVID decline, and then we came back, but just not to the extent that we were hoping for. So we had put together a committee at the beginning of this school year to look at that feedback from both families and from staff members. And based on that feedback, we were able to identify updates in all of our program areas that we think will very much strengthen the opportunities that we have for our students. So we'll go through each of those programs so that you have an update and an understanding of what we're looking to offer this year. At the high school, we've historically offered a 5-week session. We are going to continue that for students taking face-to-face courses, so that is not a change. that will stay at 5 days per week, so Monday through Friday, starting June 13th through July 15th. That's all the same what families can expect. Students at that age group can take 2 courses. And then what we're looking to enhance this year is offering different opportunities for students to access their coursework. So historically in the past, we've offered face-to-face courses and recently had been introducing some virtual options for our students. Based on the number of students that we have in our virtual academy this year, and based on feedback from families looking to have some flexibility in their programming, we are looking to expand the virtual opportunities for our students. So currently at the high school, we utilize Edgenuity for some of our students who have credit recovery courses that they are enrolled in. We would like to continue utilizing that. And we would also like to continue and extend the partnership we have with the Wisconsin Virtual School, who provides the curriculum for our current WBVA students. By continuing our partnership with the Wisconsin Virtual School, we are able to offer more credit advancement opportunities in addition to some extra credit recovery opportunities. So just allowing our students to have more access to courses and opportunities that way. It also provides our students some flexibility. The attendance for the in-person courses is very rigid based on DPI requirements. Students really can only miss 1 day of the course before they're no longer eligible to receive credit for it. So we're looking to offer the virtual options for students who travel in the summer, who have sporting opportunities, who just being in person isn't the best way that they learn. So again, providing that flexibility for families and for students. We are also looking to offer an extension of our independent study in career exploration in education for our summer school program at the high school. This is a course we currently offer at the high school. We are just looking to expand that opportunity for students into the summer. So it is a half-credit opportunity for students. They will be working with our elementary and intermediate teachers through the summer school program. It's also an opportunity that students can participate in more than once. So if they participate during the summer, that's not their only opportunity. They can participate throughout the school year as well. I believe they can do this program 3 times. I think they can earn up to 1.5 credits in this independent study opportunity. There are several more updates for our elementary program as we were really looking to, again, expand opportunities for all of our students. Some of the things that will stay the same is the first session will continue to be a 4-week time period, starting that same June 13th as the high school students and ending July 7th. We are shifting from a 5-day school week to a 4-day school week, so we would not have classes on Friday. We would have a Monday through Thursday schedule. But in that shift, in order to account for the same number of minutes and opportunities for our students, we will be lengthening the amount of time they are with us each of those days. So they're Monday through Thursday, they will be with us a little bit longer. In doing that, that allowed us to create the opportunity for students to take 3 courses each day instead of only 2. So why that's important is historically, if a student had to take an academic course in reading and an academic course in math, that was all they could take in summer school. This opportunity allows our students to participate in an enrichment activity of their choice and of their interest. So we're hoping that, again, looking to increase our numbers, that this appeals to some of our students who may not have wanted to attend summer school in the past. Because we are making efforts to increase our enrollment, we are also going to be utilizing 3 district buildings this summer for our elementary and intermediate program, because we don't want to, at the end of all of our registration, say, this building is full, it's tight, our classrooms are full, we can't offer what we said we were going to offer. So we are also then going to shift how our grade levels are grouped. Bless you. So our current 4K students, kindergarten students, and first grade students will participate at Decorah this year. Our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade students will be at Green Tree, and then our 5th through 7th graders will be at Silverbrook, and our high school students will either be virtual or in person at the high school. The only star to that is our 4th grade students with special education needs. We are looking to have them participate at Silverbrook so they have extra opportunities to become acclimated with that building. So I've had conversations with our special education teachers who felt strongly that that was in their best interests. One of the things we're doing this year to help students better understand what's offered to them and help families better understand the program is that all students will receive a recommendation letter from their teacher. Historically, we've had this practice across the district, but it may not have been fully implemented at every building or with the fidelity we would have liked. The other piece with this is our recommendations had almost always been for either math or reading. You need to take this class. And that's great, but we also want to encourage our students to follow their interests and their passions. So the recommendation form, and it's still a work in progress, will look similar to this. This will coincide with a video that students are going to get to watch. So the teachers of these courses in the past have each made a short 20-second video clip introducing the course, what do you learn, why is it exciting? So students will get to watch that video with this sheet in front of them. And the pictures are for our kindergarten and first grade students. They get to circle, like, here's what I'm interested in and I want to take this course. And then at the bottom of the sheet, this gets turned into the teacher, and the teacher has an opportunity then to also say, here's what I recommend for your student. So every child has that personal touch from their teacher of, I recommend your student taking this. I see they're interested in art. They really excel there. We offer this class. So we're looking to provide these opportunities for our students. Right now, this is the schedule that we are looking to offer. So it breaks it down by the grade levels I had mentioned, the schools, and then over here in the small font is the actual times each of those sessions will take place. The sessions, depending on if it's an elementary or more intermediate, run from about 70 to 75 minutes. Our elementary students, pre-K through fourth, have a recess block provided in there as well, just for them to be outside and have some energy time. The next update is the opportunity to provide a session 2 of summer school. And this again came about from the parent feedback surveys that we sent out, wanting summer school to last longer during the day and longer into the summer. And so this is an opportunity to value what the parents had been asking for. So we are proposing to offer a 2-week program that runs from August 1st through August 12th. That would be 5 days a week, so a Monday through Friday program. This summer, because it's new, we're going to start with just offering standards reading and standards math so that our students can have that jump start to the school year. We want to really keep them sharp, help close some of their gaps, and have this opportunity to participate in those core academic areas. We also are going to offer the music camps that we have in the past. So 5th grade band and 5th grade orchestra have always offered a get ready for the school year, learn how to play your instrument, that kind of piece. For scheduling purposes and streamlining for families, we are offering all of this in this 2-week window. So if you're planning a trip, a vacation, just how you're planning your summer, you can know that this is the window that these will take place during. Also, we've historically offered Jumpstart programs, which are transition programs. So our 4Ks going into kindergarten, they go to their elementary school for a part of a day and have a tour. And we do that at all of our grade levels. We're looking to expand that into Badger and the high school this year. So those would take place during this same time so that families, again, have this consistent time of when things are offered from the school district. This would be the slide for our academic calendar. We intentionally start early in the morning with our academic classes so that we can fit in the music camps and jump starts in the afternoon. So there is a reason that we're starting very early in the morning. It also provides our students the opportunities if you don't need to take 2 academic classes, you don't need to take them both. You can come for that second session only. And then if you would have these two side to side to compare, this is the schedule for our music camps for our 5th graders, so band and orchestra. Period 1 here overlaps with period 2 in the academic course, and that's intentional. So again, if students only want to take reading first session and then they need to take a music camp, they can take those 2 things back to back and they don't have a gap in their schedule. We also then are offering a second period, which is a repeat of period 1, so students don't have to take both periods of camp for music, but that way they could take math, they could take literacy, and they could take their band camp all right in a row, and they don't have gaps in that schedule. This also allows these end at 11:30-ish for a jump start to happen in the afternoon if a building or family was transporting to all those different places. The high school also offers enrichment summer school music camps. These are camps that are not offered for credit, but just allow students the opportunity to come together and practice their instruments or practice their talents. So the only thing that's happening outside of the that 2-week window of August 1st is the high school band leadership. They need to be trained before they can participate and help and assist at their camp. So they are working 2 days prior to that window, but it is a small group of identified students. We are offering then the high school enrichment band camp, and then we're also offering several different opportunities with the choir camp this year. So concert choir and Vivace choir are courses that students are scheduled into. This is an opportunity for those students to come in and sing with their groups a little bit earlier in the summer. And then we're also offering a Love to Sing course. That title may change because it's still details being worked out, but it's a day for any of our concert choir students or Vivace students to come in and sing together, or students who are not currently enrolled in a choir course but may be interested in it but don't have enough background on it. So that is an opportunity just one morning. And then this is just a placeholder to remind us that the jump starts will be offered during this time period. We don't have all the details for the jump starts just yet. All right. Registration will take place electronically via a Google form this year. We've always typically done it in Skyward. We had some feedback that parts of that were a little bit tricky or a little bit confusing for families. So we're going to explore more features in Skyward to make that an easier process for families, but the timeline and turnaround on that, I don't want to make it worse before we make it better. So we're going to use a Google form this year for registration, and then our summer school registrar will transfer that into Skyward for families. It will open for our high school students on Monday, March 7th. We are not going to put an official end date on that because students work on their coursework up until the end of the semester. It's quite tight turnaround time if we have students who need a credit recovery course. So we don't need to close it for the high school students. We will be we'll be opening the elementary one on Monday, March 14th, and then that will close on Friday, May 6th. That gives us the opportunity to work with some sections if we need to do a little bit of student movement, and it also allows us the opportunity to get our staffing into place appropriately. Communication for summer school, information is typically sent through Skyward Messenger to all of the families in the West Bend School District, regardless if their students go here or to one of our partner schools in late February, so that will be coming shortly. The information is sent also to all the private school principals so that they can disseminate it in their newsletters as well. Registration reminders are sent periodically throughout the registration period through local school newsletters, principal school letters, Skyward, and our district newsletter. Again, students will be receiving that recommendation letter and the video in the K-6 grade level, and all of this information will be live on our summer school website in mid-February for families. So our future action is at the next meeting, the district will request that the school board approve the offering of a summer school program for the summer of 2022. There's a lot of information. What questions can I answer?
Any questions for Aaron? Go ahead, Paul.
Aaron, thanks for taking the feedback from the community. I'm curious to know with the proposal here, have you presented this in draft mode back to some of those people to get their feedback on, yeah, this is more what we're looking for, or is this their first look at it too?
This would be their first look at it too, so that's good feedback to take. We did have quite a large number of staff members provide input on it as well as we were drafting this. But yes, to take it back to the community is a good idea as well. Thank you.
And with doing the second session, obviously there's more work on the part of the staff. They're excited about doing that?
We've already put out the staffing application, so we have staff that have signed up for one session, both sessions. Typically, staff members sort of trickle in on that as they figure out their summer school or their summer plans. So right now, I feel confident that we will have enough staff members for that. Just based on the feedback from the teachers on the committee as well, they felt that we would have enough colleagues to be able to staff that second session.
Great. And last question. Cost to families to enroll their children in this, is there any cost?
there is no cost to the summer school program in the school district.
Okay, great, thank you.
So obviously, with COVID, we saw the decline of the summer program. And obviously, we'd like to see that increase. I understand that. So what are we doing different to market to families? I mean, I understand, there's the newsletter and all that, but what else are we doing to actually kind of engage those families to get them back?
So that's the big push with the video and the recommendation forms this year. We'd like to really push that with our teachers and have our teachers have a better background knowledge and understanding so that they can communicate with families and field some of those questions, because they usually are the first line of, well, you said my child should take this class. Why? Tell me more about it. So those are some of the things we're doing to strengthen that this year. And I think it's one thing at a time that we can do. As much as we'd like to see those numbers rebound, we also don't need to skyrocket at the moment either and not be able to accommodate the need. So I think it's that balancing act of providing a solid quality program for our students and doing what we can right now.
So then will those videos also be available on the website? So for instance, my kid comes home and says, hey, you got to watch this video, and whatever, I got to find it again. And
Yes, they will be on the website when all of the registration information is posted.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your presentation. We'll see this on the next agenda as a potential action item. Thank you. All right, the other discussion item we have relates to student behavior, and I think this is a request from the board for a presentation and a topic, and Superintendent Wimmer is going to kick this off, but I see we have our principals here as well. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Superintendent Wimmer.
Like, Tim's got this loaded somewhere. I'll do introductions while you grab that. I like how some of them are staying seated. I'm still gonna get them. Right, do you hear them claiming veteran status? So they're ready to get in. Andy Kasich, principal at McLean. Adrian Schneider, principal at Decorah. Tristan Hayes, principal at Fair Park. Darcy with the fantastic Van Gogh going on. And Addison at Jackson, right down the street from that testing site, right? That's right. Jen Potter, who's at Green Tree. Ralph Schloss, who's at West High School. So, some colleagues couldn't be with us today, but certainly had a look at this. You talked about this being a follow-up item, and you're right. We talked a lot about student behavior, expectations, those pieces. We want to touch on that. There's a lot in the news around students and mental health and seeing all those pieces, and sometimes that comes out looking like behavior and not meeting expectations. So we wanted to have a conversation today so that the board and our community understands how kind of it's mutual support, right? Starting in the home, in our schools, and our overall community support students, their development, and kind of that whole child. We talk about that, and it's that academic side and that behavior piece as well. So we're just starting with the West Bend School District Way, which you've seen before, but it's really grounded in being safe, being ready, being respectful, and responsible. And again, that's in partnership with our community. You can see several collaborators here, but it's talking about what are those shared expectations. And this program, specifically in collaboration with the community, kind of finds those moments in a child's school day, or if they're out in the community, where they're really demonstrating those, and it's recognition of that. And so I'm sure they'll jump in. We've got people who are going to touch different parts, but it might spark an idea for them to jump in. The veterans will claim that they're handling it, I'm sure. But feel free to ask questions as we go as well.
Good evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about shared expectations, because this is something that is common, really K-12 or for K-12 as well. And it's around that be ready, be respectful, be responsible, be safe. And it looks different, of course, at each level and how it's executed out. But this is our solid foundation. I'm going to kind of go through these slides. So you have, like the elementary level, we have environments in which students are to be ready, be safe, be respectful, and what are the look-fors in those environments. And so each of our levels have a breakdown of what that is. And it's usually in student-friendly verbiage for elementary. I'm just going to kind of jump around a little bit. This is a Silverbrook one and a high school one. But in all different areas throughout the school building, or even outside, or on the bus, there are set expectations, and those are taught. Those are explicitly taught to our staff in the beginning of the year, Many of our schools have little boot camps with their staff, so we're grounded in those expectations. Because there's a lot of times, even with COVID mitigation, we had to adjust some of those things, whether it was on the bus or in the cafeteria or with spacing. And so that language had to come up as we started the foundation for a year. So the staff were trained in the foundation of our behavior expectations, K-12, and then we go to the student view. So we go to, for instance, this is an elementary version. You're gonna have more images, more pictures for students to be able to connect with, and those are taught explicitly to students as well in the beginning of the year and throughout the year. And then they're also touched on. So each school may have their own incentive system or look-fors for staff if they see their kiddos that are being safe. They may give them what we call at Jackson a JJ ticket, or maybe at Silverbrook they get a stamp for different things they do. And it's a little bit different for each grade level as you progress, and it needs to be, because what you do at elementary is not going to work at high school. And you need to have buy-in as well. So those students understand that. I mean, if you ask many of the students, they'll be able to rattle off what are our main foundation pieces here for West Bend School District WB Way. So another thing we have is, let's see, with these incentive, the student-friendly pictures. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk to specifically what they do, maybe the high school, what they do with some of their incentive pieces. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, some of our incentives, our students can be nominated by staff for one of these, expectations. So they'll put down on a card, for example, if a student was being safe, they'll give a specific example of a student doing something where they were being safe, let's say in the hallway, or if they were being responsible in, the cafeteria, helping in some way. They'll fill out a card. Those will get mailed home, and then we will have Students of the Week and Students of the Month, and students can win some prizes. At the high school level, we let them pick out some pretty neat things like Nifty gift cards, Nifty Nibble gift cards, and things like that.
Thanks, Ralph. One thing you may ask is, how do you kind of track student progress on this? How are we doing as a school or as a system on these different things? And a lot of times in our behavior referral process, it'll have the destination in which something may have occurred, and then what was it? Were they not being safe? Were they not being respectful? So then in our EduClimber system or in Skyward, we can pull that data and we can say, okay, some of our students are having difficulty in being respectful and, in the classroom. So maybe we need to do a little mini lesson with our teachers for our students on specific topics like that. So that's kind of the nice thing about EduClimber or Skyward. We can drill in and find out specifically what we might need to teach about a little bit more for those expectations. Anyone else want to share about shared expectations?
I think just one thing to note in this too is that everything in this framework is really based in our PBIS system. So really coming from that approach that we are reinforcing those positive behaviors with kids, and we're working with reteaching the expectations for the students who aren't getting it. So it's just really kind of balancing out that bridge.
So those were examples across different levels, and again, it starts being grounded in having shared expectations, shared language, and mindfully taking a moment and opportunity to teach those. And like I said, sometimes they need to do a little reteaching, but in that language, when we talk about, kids are learning, they're growing, they're making mistakes, and we talk about the nuance between a minor or a major offense. Major could be a new word. That could be a new, we're not sure what that is. Some schools use a flow chart to help, again, as Darcy said, maybe starting the year or reframing that for staff and thinking about it, sometimes depending on the age with kids, understanding what kind of offenses are minor offenses, they're handled in the classroom, they could be reminders, reteaching a small piece at the teacher classroom level, and which ones are major offenses where they are moving to an office and referral system. And I know, Tristan, you have some work that your team's done specifically around digging into that.
So I think when we start on a slide that shows a matrix, it's really important to identify a behavior. In order to have a reaction, you have to be able to identify where it came from. And I think when we're all working from the same response, that we're setting these expectations, therefore it's our job, our duty, to make sure the kids understand what they come for. And that takes a lot of training, a lot of nuance, because no two behaviors are exactly the same. And if you have a chart, we're essentially distilling behaviors down to it fits into category A or category B. And that's really one of the really cool things about school. You get to know the kids, you get to know a system, and you try and find it so that it works well for everyone. When we talk about majors and minors, we really talk about how do we support our staff and our families. There's nothing more challenging than a family saying, my student can't learn because of X, Y, or Z. So being able to be mindful in our responses is something that we take on, and we don't take that task lightly, because we know it affects a lot more pieces than it does on the surface. It affects the teacher's ability to do their job, but it also affects the students. And we understand students are in crisis, and many of the behaviors that show, it's our belief, or my belief, that all kids will do well if they can. No kid wants to be the bad kid. No kid is lazy inherently. It's just they don't know how to be successful. So when we build these scaffolds, it's really from a place of we want to show our students and show our staff how to be successful, or that they can be. So really the task that we have found ourselves in is really identifying first. So we can say, this is a major, this is a minor, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer. The teacher wants to build that relationship, wants to share their passion with it, and wants to keep their students in their classroom. But we understand that there are behaviors, there are situations, there are elevated feelings and emotions that escalate that to a major space. So the more that we can go beyond just identifying it and really looking to those causes, those root causes, we call them lots of different things, lagging indicators, we call them causational, we like all different ways to look at it. But really it gets down to what's causing the student to not be able to successfully participate or follow those rules. And I think the research is kind of split. 80% of kids will do it because they know it's the right thing to do. And I think later we'll see the data that supports that. The PBIS model says you have that threshold, and on top of that you have another 10 that just needs a little coaching, a little help into it, and 10% that are gonna need some substantial help. So like academics, we like to do a multi-tiered look, like where we say different levels of support. And the clearer that we can be identifying those and helping those is really what's great. We have been blessed at our elementary spaces to have a really cool set of people. We have the full-time psychologists that have been an absolute boon to helping get good insight into our students and build teams and add expertise. We have our student liaisons who have been an absolute family connection to connect resources to our building. And when we can look at it from that angle, instead of treating behavior with a consequence, instead of getting to a root cause and being a team with our families and our students, it has the ability to have us take a more, instead of treating a symptom, we're instead looking to those root causes. And that's been something that I've been really proud to be part of, and our team really does it great. So instead of saying, you're gonna go see the counselor, we've now kind of have like an en-suite where our counselor, our liaison, and our psych live, and that's referred to lovingly as our CARES team. And instead of our students going there, I'm Tia Nancy, I see you. Thank you for the body language.
I didn't do this yet. I was about
I
to
said-
next.
Are you sure you want me to talk? Because I can't help myself, so.
So, as stated at a prior meeting, I am, and many of you know this, the meanest mom in West Bend. So I'm a firm believer, Mr. Kasich could tell you this, all three of my daughters went there. So, and you had all three of them, I
I
believe.
don't think you
So-
get the same feedback from all three of them, Nancy.
Yeah, I think you might. So in any case, I'm a firm believer that there do need to be consequences. And while I can appreciate the charts and all of this, sometimes there's consequences. And in your work life, there's major consequences, right? You can't get along with your coworkers, you continue to do things that are outside the rules, and then you get fired. So obviously, we can't fire kids. So, it's a little disturbing to me that we go about the hand-holding route and let's make everyone sing and hold hands and kumbaya it up, when sometimes we just need some consequences.
Sure.
So I'd love to hear more about that.
Segue to Ken Potter. Well, what's the response? Because sometimes, yeah, but true to point, we don't sit there and kind of beat our own heads against the wall. We've given an opportunity. We made that clear. We taught that expectation. It's a shared expectation. And yep, they mess up. And again, there's that continuum of responses, and we certainly have that, whether it's, kind of on that side of gentle reminder all the way through loss of privileges. It can be, suspensions. It can be expulsions. It can be citations. There's a whole continuum, and you can kind of run up and down that ladder where you need to, depending on what that offense is. There's certain processes in place to not just kind of refer in those major instances, but I'll have Jen kind of talk a little bit about progressive discipline in that. But know when we say that, sometimes people can mistake like, oh, you have to go here, here, and here. It's progressive always. Nope, you can have an egregious offense where we go from 0 to 60 inside of a heartbeat. That's our administrative perspective that's so stated, and that can happen if it's needed. But I'll let you talk about that progression.
So we use what's called a progressive discipline model at Green Tree, and I know some of the other schools use something kind of similar in the same way. Really what this is leading out from, did we teach the expectation? That's got to be the first point before we can look at how we're going to consequence not meeting the expectation. It's sometimes ad nauseum, which is fun for the parents when I get to a step 5 where we're working together on what we're going to do next is we have interventions for that. So I think the thing to remember is if we're moving up this ladder and we're redirecting and intervening with the behavior, and teachers have come up with a lot of different ways that I'll show you a chart where they've come together to really come with how do we intervene with behaviors, because that's a tricky thing to do, especially at an elementary level. Are we providing enough opportunities for kids to practice after they've made a goal to change their behavior or come up with a new plan to be successful? And then we're getting to the top where maybe it's not working, and we're working with the parents to really come up with some next steps and intervene with that. So we're, just like Jen had said, we can go 0 to 60, depending on the offense. But in a regular, minor stage where a student's not following an expectation, we're trying to work through a response protocol that teachers know and students know, so we can offer as many opportunities to be successful with demonstrating the correct behavior as opposed to the negative. So ways that we work through this is the students reflect on their behavior. So if you have a behavior identified and the student knows what the expectation is, and the student chose not to follow the expectation for whatever reason, we work through, why was that? What does that look like? So these are just examples of different sheets. There's a few different ones depending on grade level, depending on what the circumstance was. And with that becomes a plan, something that changes differently next time. Now, if that next time comes around and the student still is unable to identify that they can correctly follow the expectation, that's where you also can move up the progressive discipline ladder. So teachers have come up with different ways to kind of break down these redirections and interventions, and this is just one example of kind of taken from a PBIS scaffold of what teachers can look at for different ideas to help intervene with the behaviors along the way. So it's really just kind of moving up that ladder depending on, we talk about the whole child. This is depending on talking about specific students, working with teams of teachers on what interventions are going to be appropriate at what times.
So I think, to your point, there's that progressive piece in as kids learn, but developmentally, and having that expectation where they might be learning at that elementary level, but at the high school level, you can see that this is right in their handbooks. It's like, hey, here's some offenses, here's how they're considered. There's, this whole spectrum of possibility as far as discipline and consequence for the choices that you're making. We assume, that they've got responsibility for the choices that they make. And I know your high school team, your teachers, as you kind of look at behavior, you're working at it from different angles. And as Jen was saying, putting in plans, not just for individual students, but then maybe what are we doing at the high school to disrupt, attendance and truancy issues? What's the intervention? What's the consequence, which are citations, that kind of thing. But, how does that work hand in hand? So I'll let you speak to high school.
Yeah,
It's a little different.
No, you've said it well, and Nancy had a good point. One of the things we want to do, though, when we hand down any kind of consequence is change the behavior, right? That's really what we're after. Punitive consequences often do change behavior. But the reality is this. Sometimes they don't work. Nancy mentioned she had 3 children. We have over 2,000 students at the high school. So what will work for one student may not work for another student. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to teach, use our progressive discipline model, but there comes a point, like Nancy was saying, where a consequence has got to be handed down that you would hope won't manifest, that behavior then won't manifest again and be disruptive to the school environment. Because we've got, we're trying to educate all students, and sometimes an individual's behavior is so terrible that, we have to probably go more extreme. And you can see, it was shared with you, we have gone before the board and we have done school expulsions. We've gone to abeyance on students. We've had reentry contracts with students and their families. We have, referred students to law enforcement for consequences. So we have a number of different things we do at the high school level, and oftentimes they're successful, and sometimes, again, what might work for some students won't work for a student. So, any questions?
Of course.
Well, hang on. I just think to reinforce that point, you're in protection of a learning environment, and when they don't, follow in a manner that leaves that uninterrupted, they're going to be removed and consequenced because it's bigger than just that student. So go ahead.
So I think to make note for a couple things here. I mean, I think when you have a student who has been through Jackson or any one of our elementary schools, right, this is something that they've heard for the last 10, 12 years by the time they get to the high school. But we also know at our high school that we have an influx of kids from different schools, right? Or people may be moving to the district or transferring in or whatever. So I understand there's probably a level of reteach, whatever you want to call it. But, we have kids that we know are disruptive and disrespectful. And obviously, I understand your point to want to get to the root of, like, why does this kid, not behave in the proper way while this kid does. But, I mean, at what point are you like, okay, you've been in my office 5 times for the same thing, and I've had it. Like, at what point does that actually happen where we actually are saying, okay, this is not a situation where you're going to get a citation, but this is not the West Bend way, and we're not going to tolerate this behavior anymore. I mean, is that an in-school suspension? Is that we're not going to expel a kid for that, but at what point are you like, listen?
You might. So there are points, and Rob can speak to the high school level, in anywhere where a repeated minor becomes a major issue. So that escalates. And you can have someone who we would call repeated refusal, and they would come forward to a board for expulsion with chronic repeated refusal. And that's the language that we would use, just repeated refusal to follow established school expectations. So that is absolutely possible.
I don't think I've seen that in my 2 terms. So that would be my, and perhaps there's not that going on at the school, but I guess the last group of parents and teachers who spoke to us would imply that is going on at the high school. So, not being there personally, I wouldn't know that, right? So, I mean, do I hear stories from kids? Sure. But with 3 kids and this being my youngest, I take that with a grain of salt, as I would encourage most parents to really think about that. The story grows from the time they get out of the parking lot to the time they walk in your front door. So, I would say that I haven't seen a lot of that, so talk to us about that. And I understand kids were out of school, and I don't really want to hear that like it's because of COVID, because I'm kind of done with that excuse for everything.
No, there's some wraparound support. Before we bring a student to the board for repeated refusal, what we're going to do is we're going to convene a team of educators, counselors, people at teachers. We need to get data, and we need to collect information about where these behaviors are occurring, when they're occurring, find out what, we're trying to get as much information as possible, and we're working with district administrators as well on perhaps some other options that might exist. For example, pulling a student out of the high school building temporarily, that might suffice, right? So we don't, the last thing we want to do is go to an expulsion, but we're willing to do it. We're willing to do it. We just have to we want to follow some steps before we get to that point.
So last point, and then I promise I'll let someone else talk. Perhaps if we did that once or twice, it might make the consequences seem real to other students. So, that would just be my comment. My kid, I'll just pick on her because she knows I'm going to every time we have a meeting.
Really?
I would hate to think that my child's education is being disrupted by another child. My kid is just as important as the disruptor, right? So, so as a parent, I'm kind of saying like, enough. Like, my kid deserves to have their full class time, whatever the period is, free of disruption from other students. So at what point are we willing to finally take a stand and say, enough is enough, and sorry, child A, you're out, because you've disrupted us too many times. But, I also think getting to the root of why are they being disruptive is critical, right? Do we have somebody else in class who looks like an angel but might be just interrogating and just pressing on those buttons to try and get the disruptor in trouble? I think that's probably happening a little bit too. So, I guess I'd like to see, I'm not suggesting that we start kicking kids out of school for no reason, but if there's someone who's on the verge, I think making a example out of them might be time.
Like Superintendent Wimmer is saying, we're willing, we just want to follow our steps, okay? So.
So part of that you alluded to was understanding documentation, right? So I think Darcy was kind of foreshadowing this a little bit, but it's really leveraging the systems you have so that it's not just on perception around those repeat offenders. It's using the systems to document minors, majors, et cetera, looking at those things so you can really, not just at an individual level, so our administrators aren't spending their time counting data and looking at it. It's running reports that show them who, when, what's going on, so that they're spending their time changing that behavior or dealing with consequences when they need to. So when we use those systems, we use, again, Skyward as our student information system, and we were looking at and just running out of K4, that minors and majors. When you look at, over 90% of our students have had 0 to only 1 instance in this first semester. And that's where you want to see, right? Majority of your students who are following expectations, and doing what they need to do. And again, K4, we certainly acknowledge is a little bit different with their behaviors. And when you look at, that kind of 6+ incidents, that's 50 students across our 5 elementaries. And how do we use our staff to wrap around? And we'll talk about that staff that Tristan was speaking about a little more and kind of what they're bringing to the table as we work with families and with students. When you look at that middle level, you see that again, you're seeing in that 80% range and really digging into then if across grades 5 through 8, there's that 100 students, what are those behaviors, where are they occurring? In 5 through 8 as well as 9 through 12, we disaggregated out attendance incidences. So that's if a student's tardy for class, missing school, that kind of thing. So you could see what were the behaviors that were present in a classroom and what are behavioral, which is an attendance component, but so that you could just see the nuances of those as well. And then at 9-12 as well, when you're factoring out that attendance piece, 90% of your students are acting in accordance with the way that you would expect them to. And what we've done is really work across the district with teams to give them the tools that they can spend their time digging into data. So this is just a snapshot of the high school where they're really able to look at, so what are our top 3 behavior incidences? Is there a certain hour or time? Is there a certain day? Who are my repeat offenders? So we're pulling them in and dealing with that. And they're focusing their time on how they responded. So I'll let Ralph jump in, kind of the work that you're doing at the high school.
No, this is just something that on a weekly basis, we put this in our newsletter to our staff so they're aware of what is going on because we think it's important that they have this information. And like Jen was saying, we're taking a look at when these incidents occur and we're trying to allocate our resources, our manpower, to these areas that might have higher frequencies of misbehaviors. If we, for example, if we have skipped classes, we're taking a look at are our responses appropriate? Are we, for example, when we refer for truancy, are those working? Or are they are the students continuing to skip class? And if they're continuing to skip class after getting a ticket, a citation, or 2 or 3, then what else should we, what else can we try? What else should be done? So this information, again, is a team of people, team of educators at the high school meets on a weekly basis to take a look at the various behaviors that are occurring, and then they formulate plans for individuals, and then we respond.
When you talk about some of those individuals doing that work, certainly teachers are involved, your support staff, but just digging into some of who those specialists are, and I'll invite principals to speak about that. But again, unique to West Bend, right? Staffing can occur at different levels. West Bend's made a commitment to have a full-time counselor in every one of its building, multiples at those larger schools. We have full-time school psychologists, and again, that's not practice that's in every system. So it's not an automatic staffing, like I know I have a third grade room and I'm for sure gonna have a teacher in it. Some are sharing counselors across multiple buildings, different levels, that kind of thing. So we've made a real commitment around this with our counselors, our psychologists, family liaisons. Also embedded are some West Bend Way leaders. They could be one of those people, they could be anyone on staff who have come up to the district level and really works on and helps schools move forward with analysis and process, as well as some school teams. In addition, we have, again, on-site counseling services from those staff. We handle assessment, screening, and evaluation. We might be doing small group or individual services. We do absolute intervention. And then people might not be aware unless they've taken advantage, but there's also on-site therapists, licensed therapists that actually have offices in our schools. So this allows minimal disruption to a student's day, to a family, that their child or children can participate in licensed therapy in addition to the services we offer. So I guess I would invite principals just to speak of kind of the teams and how those specialists support.
Well, I think we're incredibly fortunate in West Bend because of the partnerships we have with those various agencies, whether they're therapeutic or whether they're the Boys and Girls Club. Jay Fisher has been a tremendous partner. So has the YMCA. And we get mentoring services, for example, at the high school through the Boys and Girls Club called Be Great Graduate. And we have an awesome, awesome employee, Boys and Girls Club does, by the name of Eric Green. And he comes in and he meets with students, and he offers some really intensive, mentoring. He checks in with students, and he's one of these people that just is relentless in trying to turn around a young person's life. We also have partnerships, for example, at the high school with Casa Guadalupe. I think a lot of you are familiar with that. We have a program up there called Dream to Succeed, where we have one of their employees who is kind of their education coordinator, who comes into the building on a monthly basis and meets with students as well. So those are just a couple of examples of other partners who don't, they're not employed by the West Bend School District, but we have certain agreements with them where they can come and work with our students and support the work we're trying to do.
I felt compelled. My colleagues did a great job in Wimmer for putting this together and really speaking to all the things that we have going on in our schools. One of the things at all of our elementaries, especially, and that's the world I know, so I'm sure it's happening at the upper levels as well, but is really coming down to relationships with our kids. And so when we know the students have relationships, we're going to know more about them and what they need. So specifically at Decorah, we've been identifying, had students identify who are they connected to. And then kids who really did not feel a deep connection to many people in our building, we've got them on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly connection with a staff member. That's with parent permission, everything, in that light. So the parent is aware of what's happening to just really wrap around that child to make sure they do feel connected. For some of those kids that they're just not feeling that, for whatever reason, that connectedness to the school, which may lead to some of that disruptive behavior because they're just not feeling a part of our community. So I think that's another really important piece that we all have going on in various ways in our buildings that have been really helping our students with that success, because yes, consequences, to Nancy's point, consequences do need to happen, but I've always led with and Ralph spoke to it, if a child's not going to learn from that consequence, it's not, I mean, I may need to out of school suspend a student because of the level of severity, but if it's not a severe enough incident, if I don't think that that consequence is going to change that child's behavior, I need them in school so that I can provide that instruction. And so we have to make sure that those are connected. I mean, if, you know, we go, I mean, I'm not always a rule follower on the street, you know, but if I see that cop, I know I'm going to change my behavior. And if I get a ticket, I'm going to change my behavior. And I'm not inviting anybody to follow me on my way home tonight. But my point is, we do things that we do, and we need that intrinsically motivated reason to do it. So that's what we're really trying to build with our little ones from 5 to 10 years old, so that as they get up to Ralph and John, then they can have more success with some of that going on. So just want to share that little bit about the mentoring component at our schools too.
Adrian brings up 2 key points. One, we're also blessed with very limited mobility. While we do have kids move in, the majority of our students are sticking with us, so we can hopefully catch that early, disrupt any misbehavior, and get them on a right path. And also that piece around being connected. Just a reminder, sometimes students, every parent's probably going to nod their head, sometimes students save their behavior for at home. And they're working real hard all day to keep it together, and they might have some behaviors that need attention at home. Just a reminder that we're here as a resource. So whether that struggle is showing up in the classroom, if you want to call on any of the counselors, the psychologists, or just wondering and talk through some things, they're happy to do that to get people connected. But I'd love for you to highlight any more connections or pieces that you're doing at your schools too.
I think just one thing to really kind of come back to is, we know, I mean, I have experience at the elementary and at the high school, and we work off a pretty proactive in the beginning to reactive as they get older, because the police are going to get you. The real life's going to get you as you get older. So really, a lot of these services, we provide a lot of wraparound care for a child. I mean, there are students at my school who have, where Adrian's talking about the mentorship of the adults, who have 10 to 12 adults with them, thinking about them, encouraging them, meeting with them, working with them, so that we can have a successful point when they move to a more reactive stage in life, when there's no turning back. We can't fix this. We can't think about our behaviors and change it and show differently that we can produce our actions. So I think a big piece of this servicing that's really great is that I can comfortably sit with a child who really needs extreme help and know that there's 12 adult individuals in a wraparound care servicing to help that student. So I think that's just really important to note the great services that we do have for our kids.
And because of our size and sitting as a county seat in those pieces, the next couple slides, and these are accessible for families as well, just making sure, again, we might be aware of connections in the community to additional supports, whether you need it for your child, your family, et cetera. We'll make sure that you have knowledge of those connections as well. But again, these are just samples of services or other partner agencies that work with us or on behalf of our students and families in the community. So again, rich resources, a lot of trained adults, and that whole spectrum of, like we said, just on-site, our own staff expertise, as well as welcoming other trained staff from the community into our schools to support as well.
So real quick, I lied to you. I still have one more. I don't see the middle school principals here, which is unfortunate, because I feel like sometimes that's where the wheels start to fall off the bus, lack of a better analogy there. And so I'd like to, I'm intrigued by your mentoring, or I'm sorry, whatever you called it. Are we doing that same type of thing, the 5th through the 8th grade? Because I feel like that's really when kids, as all of you would know, and anybody who's a parent, that's when we really could start to have a lot of problems. Kids kind of, maybe start to hang around with the wrong crowd, or just become way too introverted or whatever. So what are we doing at those levels where I feel like it's critical? No offense, Ralph, but by the time they get to the high school, sometimes it's a lost cause. Let's just admit it. And I know you're trying everything you can. I'm not debating that. But I mean, if we can stop it through the 5th through 8th grade, perhaps it would be less of a headache at the high school.
Certainly at our middle schools, and they would have loved to have been here, but they couldn't. they have those programs. They have outside agencies that come in. They have counseling staff, school psychologists, et cetera. They have, you would have in-school suspension rooms when you talk about consequences and those pieces, same thing. Our school resource officers serve at that level as well. There's one on site at Badger, also works across Silverbrook. So you have that whole arrangement too, but we can make sure and call out some of those specific middle school things that they're doing. I was going to say, we have some middle school experts that might not just be
I'm
there.
not a middle school expert. I had some experience teaching 5th grade. But I think
You're it then.
I'll take it. So we are working on this. Like Mr. Rell has connected with us on multiple times. We have meeting sets that we work on that, and we've identified a lot of those things about why some of those disconnects exist. And realistically, you're changing people. Like we talk about inside of my building, I have a kid who will say, I love this teacher, and they've always been my person to go to, and building those relationships we know is fundamental. And when you leave, there's a disconnect. And if they don't find their people, their place, that's challenging to do. It's a challenging space. It's not just a challenging age, it's a challenging space. And in those, when you don't feel connected, then a consequence for a 11, 12-year-old is like, well, great, mom's yelling at me, or my teacher's yelling at me, I don't care. But how do you combat someone who doesn't care? You can't make someone care. And that's where this becomes a support piece, where how do we support those kids before the wheels fell off, before we're looking at something like a nuclear option of expulsion? How do we keep those? Those are our kids. When they fail, that hurts. That fails us. And anyone who has kids will say, yeah, that hurts when they let us down, but how do we bring them back in? And from my experience, the best thing we can do is build those supports, those relationships. And one of the things that Lance has been working on with us is about how can we make that transition more meaningful? How can we support those kids that we know? We know 90% of our kids are rock stars, are following through, are working through, aren't receiving any or one of those referrals. But how do we support those kids? And especially those kids that have 6+, they're known knowns going into Silverbrook. But it's those kids that are unknown knowns or the known knowns that explode. There's still a lot of work to do. And I think the team will be the first to recognize that supporting those kids is a task, it's a challenge, and we're up to that challenge. And the supports that we've put in place are there on purpose. But we're meeting a lot of kids' needs. There are some that still have more work to do. So I would say that to the response of middle school.
I just want to add one more thing. I'd have to say our family liaisons are a hidden gem across the whole system. So if you want the connection between student and family, they go out into the families and they're that non-threatening voice and like just a hand holding out. It's not the principal, it's not the counselor. Maybe they had a bad experience going through school and so they're kind of hands off. But our family liaisons are really great at going in and leveraging what they can, what relationships they can build, because you have to have the parent on board. So that kiddo that has 6 repeated offenses for something, there's a deeper root cause, and a lot of times you need that family connected, and there are real hidden gems in Silverbrook. I mean, they're really working on that part too, with those family liaisons and throughout our whole system, so.
I was going to ask about a major offense at the high school. One of the first things that happens is you call a parent. How are some of those phone calls? Because I would imagine that there are some parents at home who probably just don't care that their kid is getting into trouble all the time. And so obviously the family liaison is a great, but am I right that there's some of those phone calls probably aren't as supportive as we would like them to be?
Well, and to Darcy's point, and I'm sure Ralph can speak to it as well, and it's, you know, I don't want to characterize as uncaring, but maybe it's been a pervasive problem, and they're at their wits' end as well. And so how do you navigate that? How do you engage them too? Because, like I said, it could be a bigger environment. Generally, when there's some considerable behavior problems, it's present in multiple environments: school, community, home, those pieces. So I'll let you.
No, I think what you said is all entirely true. It's just really dependent upon the person the phone call you're making at that moment. I would say the majority of people are very supportive yet of the schools and what we're trying to do. But to Jen's point, I think some people have fatigue. They're trying to just put meals on the table. They're trying to keep the electricity on and keep the heat pumping in their house. So there are times that we talk to parents. They go, I don't know what to do. I have no idea. I really don't know what to do. So any ideas you might have, and we got to remember, we've said this for a while, A lot of those students that we are trying to get through high school, we want them to have that piece of paper that says they're a graduate, because they're going to stay more than likely in West Bend, right? So we want to position them to be employable and to, maybe they take a look at what has happened to them and they'll pay it forward and say, you know what, I had this kind of support and I needed it, because I've heard from students who said, I'm glad you didn't give up on us. I'm glad you were pushing us. So, yeah, those phone calls are unique.
Well, and I think too, when you're navigating with a family who, is supportive or maybe at their wit's end or struggling in some ways, it's a little different than a family who, is, I don't care, that kind of thing. And we certainly come across those, but then that restricts your choices. If you're not going to be a partner in a solution or something like that, that means that's going to restrict the opportunities for your child, because you got to be in this as a team. Because again, when you're getting to that level, these behavior problems are going to be pervasive at home, community, and the classroom. So we're looking for partnership, but in the absence of it, it makes a pretty clear path for us sometimes on what we need to do. Any other questions for?
Can I go?
I got one comment too. So, a lot of thoughts again. I appreciate the progressive model at the elementary levels. I get that we're dealing with, moldable young people, and you don't want to immediately fly off the handle. But I'm going to jump to the high school, because I think the impetus for this presentation ultimately came out of what we heard in the October-November timeframe. And I'm sorry John's not here to kind of share in the story, Ralph, but there were comments that were made, and I appreciate Nancy's statement that, the story grows bigger from the time they get out of the car till they walk in the front door, but the fact that there is a story tells us something. But there were comments that were made about things happening in the high school, things that are being said that appalled me. And Mr. Lone's scenario specifically, and a couple questions. One, do all of our teachers feel empowered that, during passing time, when they're outside their room, if they hear something like that, they have every right to jump in the middle of that thing and grab the individual by the collar and say, we're going to go have a conversation?
We don't grab kids by the collar.
Okay, sorry, that's what I would do. That's why I'm not in
No,
teaching.
That's
Do
probably
we-
why I'm not going to employ you.
You see something, though, you say something.
Exactly.
That is the expectation. The expectation is we're all responsible for student behavior, not just the two principals and 4 assistant principals. It is everyone's job to make sure our students are making good choices. And when they're not, and a student is misbehaving, we expect that student to be reported to us, that behavior stopped in the moment if it's dangerous. And we expect, that by any means necessary, if it's dangerous, if there's a situation where a student, they're physically in danger, yeah, we want to put a stop to that by, getting ourselves in the way of, a student maybe getting physical with another student. But to the point, Mr. Fisher, I think one of the things that I had heard in the fall was, well, nothing was done about some of these behaviors. Nothing can be further from the truth. There were consequences for all those behaviors, and they were strict.
Did the consequences change behavior?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no.
Okay. And in the cases where it didn't, we progressed to the next level.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and these things are not expulsion or expellable offenses on their first offense the way that certain things are, but it certainly is. I mean, you talk about bullying, and this is to the extreme, that our students need to know that, no.
Right.
That we will not stand for
That's
that.
correct.
But I think that's a piece too, that the high school team, the teachers, kind of walking in and having that conversation openly. I know that they're working to build up some student leadership teams to hear more directly from students and voice and around their experience. And again, making sure that we're leveraging data maybe in a new way as we clean up and utilize some systems so that you're looking at and probably catching a lot sooner people who it's just been a grind of repeat offenses and saying like, no, here's the expectation and this is shifting. So they're engaged in those conversations. Is it perfect? No, but are they making movement forward? Yes. And then there's teams who at the district, Emily Melstrand, Jill Corbett, Carrie Hughes, those people come in and help add an added layer of consultation and support for the school leaders as they work to address that. Because certainly we'll hear from teachers, and what I appreciate is that they're pretty candid about saying where they're frustrated, and they can pinpoint, right? Like, it's this hallway, I feel like I'm saying X, Y, and Z all the time over and over like a broken record, and they're not giving me this respect, they're not doing this. Okay, we need administrators there, and what's the schedule of who's where? And do you need additional support in supervision? Like, how do we need to look at that? When do they pull in Lenny around, put people where they're needed? Because to Adrian's point of, like, if I see a cop sitting on the corner, then it's gonna shift how I behave, so. Not perfect by any means. We're happy to do a follow-up.
And you won't change the culture overnight, but we've got to turn the ship.
So, and I think we talked about that when Darcy talked about the behaviors. It has to be a constant reinvigoration. You have to constantly give and inform your staff that it is their job, that it is something we all have to passionately do together, that it has to happen again every year. Every teacher needs that reminder that, yes, these behaviors are ours. Every support staff member needs to hear how their impact changes those behaviors. And again, if in just our little beans, if they're walking down the hall and everybody that's there has a consistent expectation that we're safe, we're safe with our feet, safe with our voice, safe with our hands. If we don't do that, then it grows. Allowed behaviors continue. So again, if that's not something we're consistently focused on and consistently working towards, then it grows. So I think I hear you saying loud and clear, you would like to see an additional response, and that's something that we need to do all the time. Be a good listener, being a good reflective practitioner when it comes to those pieces.
Yeah, you've got the West Bend Way, which is our universal culture, but you've got the culture of every building, and you get to the high school, and if you're a freshman, and hey, this is a new setting, I got new boundaries, I can start to push and see where the envelope is, and we just need to be ready that we know where the boundaries are.
But, I mean, and she said our people need coaching too.
Yeah.
Our staff members, they want our help. How can I be a better response? How do I help stop these kids do this behavior? Because maybe just yelling at them doesn't work. We need to try something different, and that's part of the team.
Sorry, real quick, I lied. So on that.
I was gonna yield it first.
On that, that's my quick question. So obviously, I'm the type of student where maybe I respond better to Mr. Kasich pulling me out in the hallway and yelling at me. And maybe my daughter responds better to your, kind, gentle demeanor. I do think that,
Was it by the collar? Did he pull you out by the collar?
it wasn't that bad, but,
I worked for Andy. He was my principal when I was a teacher.
No, I'm just teasing Andy. But on a serious note, I think we know that some students respond better probably to Mr. Slash, and some students maybe respond better to, somebody else. I don't know, I can't think of anybody at the high school. So my point is, what is our training with our teachers? Because I have a hard time believing that, if you're standing out in the hallway and you're screaming the same thing over and over again, guess what? It's not working. So maybe we should try something else. So what is the training with the teachers to say, like, hey, tone it down a smidge. Maybe you don't have to screech. If you just had a gentle conversation, we might be able to get somewhere.
And before you answer that, because I didn't get a word in, because, no, that's no, I have one idea. I think, I have 10 educators in my family. I've been through public schools. I think the leniency scale compared to 30 years ago on extra chances, this is like way off the charts. And that's today's environment. I got an idea on teaching and mentoring because the police chief Deering came to our company and did on mentoring, leadership, and motivation. And he put together an outstanding presentation. So just an idea on an extra kind of coaching and mentoring, giving him another task to do, but he could come into all of our schools, maybe at your teacher's resource hour, and put together a joint presentation developed with administrative and schools and give, because I do think the fear, or if it taught our company one or two things. If it teaches your teachers or administrators one or two things, that's great. So that's my idea,
So-
not giving him extra tasks, but
Giving him some extra credit. He already came over and visited our cabinet team just to make that, even though we've worked together for years, just new role, new piece, and affirmed their commitment to working in collaboration, talking about the community, our joint service to the community, our kids being part of that. So we're really excited around probably most like launching some things with him and also the new captain in the coming school year to kind of reset that. But currently we have our SLOs and they work hand in hand, and they can also go out to any elementary as well and serve there too. So, but I know he's looking forward to that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, it's underway.
Yep. Any other?
Well, I was saying, just to address Nancy's question.
You have to come
she
up to
asked,
the
like,
podium
what
so you can be
training- So, like, to avoid the yelling at,
Can't follow
you know,
the
the kid if
directions.
it's not working. So, Pupil Services has trained coaches.
Come on up.
I'm gonna get comments from my family if you don't speak to the microphone.
Sorry.
They watch.
I talk loud. So through our nonviolent crisis intervention training, it teaches verbal de-escalation strategies. And so it's really about how to approach a situation based on the situation that's in front of you. So that's part of what our staff goes through and really just trying to avoid the escalation of a behavior. You know, the beauty of knowing kids is I was raised by a mom who yelled a lot. She's a wonderful lady, but she was the disciplinarian in the house. I tuned her out. My dad yelled, that meant business. And so you have to just kind of know that with the kids. And so I do have the kids, I call the parent and I say, I don't need another consequence. Being brought into my office to have a conversation was enough to have them shaking their boots. I don't think it's gonna happen again. Other kids, they know every book in my office. So like, you know, it just changes. But so the staff do, Emily's team, has trainers that do that, and we do that for our special education staff, our aides, and our teaching staff as well through those strategies for the de-escalation to avoid the yelling at them because it's not working. Yeah, so.
I think Mr. Fisher hit it on the head. Like, this is a work in progress. This isn't 30 years ago when I went to high school at West Bend. When I was first a teacher, I wasn't taught de-escalation strategies for students. That wasn't part of my repertoire nor where I felt comfortable. So I think part of this piece, and Ralph had said it too, we're all responsible for teaching students, and that's a slightly newer wave of education. It used to just be teachers took care of academics and the principal took care of behaviors, and there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of pieces to kids that we're trying to sort out and work out and wrap care around them to make sure that they're successful in our community by the time they graduate. So I think that's just really key to kind of remembering where we're at, and that we're not perfect. This isn't perfect yet, but we're working really hard to get it to a place where we all feel successful, including the kids.
And I remind any students, any family who's watching, you know, there's different tip lines available. If you're experiencing anything at school, we'd be remiss if we didn't say, reach out to someone that you feel comfortable with. If there's no one, there's anonymous tip lines. There's other, avenues for you to make sure that you're getting grown-ups around you in the know. Talk to your family. They can help convey that message. If you think you need support, not just on the behavior end, but you're struggling emotionally or those pieces, you can see there's a lot of people who do care. So again, just making sure that families or students reach out to adults around them, whether it's at home or school or even anonymous means, to help us connect.
Any other questions or discussion on the topic? I want to thank you for coming tonight. This clearly is a topic of interest to the board, and I think was an educational session for all of us in the community, which I appreciate. That's a great opportunity for us, and thank you for hearing our feedback and suggestions as well. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'm just going to take the opportunity as we move to action items to just pause for a second just to check to make sure our friend Aaron Dove is still connected and online. Aaron, can you confirm that you're still there?
I'm here.
Excellent. All right. Great. Then we'll roll into our action items. So most of these, I think, are items that we had seen at the prior meeting and are brought forward tonight for action. And the first is enrollment projections for open enrollment seats, and Superintendent Wimmer will walk us through that.
Last time, I was going to say if someone can save me from going to the podium. Otherwise, last time I went through the calculations. You can see it on your own screen. Certainly click on that at home. We talked about how those were calculations, and it's something that the board must act on every January. We're recommending unlimited seats in our 4K, 5K, our earliest learners, 6 special education seats, and 27 regular education seats. There's certainly means, second slide, Andy. There's certainly means for families. We were able to accommodate last year. You know, it depends on how enrollment shakes out. I don't want anyone to look at this and think, oh, well, they really closed the doors. We're not. You can make an application to attend if you're a non-resident. We'd encourage you to do so. It's just a piece that we need to take formal action on every January based on projections at this point. So I'd ask for formal approval for those 6 special education seats, 27 regular education seats, unlimited in 4K and 5K as presented.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion and second to, to get this right, to approve the open enrollment seats as presented. And a final discussion. All right, hearing none, I will call the motion. Ms. Dove?
Yes.
Mr. Rebholz?
Yes.
Mr. Ongert?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Swigert votes yes. Ms. Schmidt is absent. And Ms. Justman?
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. Thank you. And we'll move on to the financial audit for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. And Mr. Sarno, welcome. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Wimmer. I have a brief set of information. I do have the full audited financials that was loaded into the board packet for this this meeting. 2 weeks ago, Brian Grunwald, he's a partner, principal at Clifton Larson Allen, presented information. It wasn't just revolving around the actual audited financials. He discussed other things. We talked about fund balance a little bit. They actually just don't dig into the numbers, but they look at procedures, making sure that we're in compliance with different policies, federal requirements. And so since then, over the last 2 weeks, I look back and I've not received any comments or questions from the members of the board, the community, staff, any constituents of the other stakeholders. I did feel a need to thank many people today. This is a big undertaking that we go about every year. It's a requirement. But when I look at my financial team, my business services team, they did an outstanding job, as was noted by Brian. We had several findings, light slaps on the wrist where we needed to improve. That's what I like to utilize the audit is. It's a look back, but we have the ability to continue to improve. And you'll see that in this audit is the 2 that are still there, they have a high potential of being there forever. We're just that mid-sized district, segregation of duties, preparation of the audited financials. Those are 2 things that I've had in bigger districts, much bigger districts than ours. But I do want to thank Julie Marks. She's our district controller. She did a phenomenal job. Christine Ringel is our grants coordinator, did a great job this year. We made a lot of improvements with our federal grants document. That's a comprehensive requirement. We're in compliance with that. Even when I take a look at the nutrition team with Abby and Suzanne, that was one of the big areas that they audited, as well as people services. Wendy is a team member there. Everybody just collaborated, and I think that really came forward in a sound audited financial document that Brian presented and that we have in front of you. It is a motion to accept. I have to admit that information's already been submitted to the Department of Public Instruction. I've already uploaded the document to the Federal Clearinghouse. So this is still important for you to acknowledge the audit. That's why we brought Brian here to have that discussion and be public about it. But so it is a acceptance in front of you tonight.
Any questions on the financials? Hearing none, I would move to accept the June 30, 2021 audited financials for the 2020-2021 fiscal year as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and second to accept the audited financials as presented. Any final discussion?
Your team and everyone who worked so hard on this.
Yeah, and we'll continue to make improvements. Yeah. Thank you, Aaron.
And those that didn't get to see, it was a full.
Ooh, that's all right. The Aaron's off mute. Go ahead. Aaron, did you have a question?
Chris made the motion, I did the second.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I just want to say for the people viewing, if the tape is the last meeting, we spent 20 minutes on this. It was an excellent presentation, and we received good marks, and this district's in good financial leadership position. So I thank everyone on the team who helped with this.
I would I will make sure, again, there was the actual audited financial documents that were uploaded on the 10th, as well as tonight's meeting, and then I'll make sure that there's 3 or 4 copies out at the front lobby, that if somebody wanted to grab one, they can do that.
Thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, I will call the motion. Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Zweigert votes yes. Mr. Ongert?
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt is absent. Ms. Dove?
yes,
Mr. Repholz?
Yes.
Ms. Justman? That motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on then, pardon me, to the fund balance designation. Mr. Sarno.
Thank you again. With this document and these designations, we're performing 3, if not more, but 3 important notable items. Ourselves, as we take a look at these reserves, it's not a cash position. We do take a snapshot in time as of June 30th. That's what this is. But it's an equity or a fund balance designation, but it covers possible exposure to costs. If a boiler breaks mid-year that's not been budgeted, there's a purpose for that. The second piece is it allows us to plan for the future with some areas. We have a Jackson Trust designation. We have a turf field replacement designation. It allows us to plan for future needs that we've identified. The third area is that, and this is very big, and this was a part of the rating call that we had this last year, their biggest request of us to say, we'd like you to go from a AA negative, which again, it's in that top tier of that rating matrix. If you ever wanted to improve, you have to increase your unassigned general fund balance. So what that does is it provides stability to us, is being viewed as fiscally responsible, and it allows us just that stability. And yes, it also does allow us for cash flow. We see that within our board policy with fund balance, very important. So what's in front of you tonight, and again, I shared a little bit of information. We had a brief discussion around it 2 weeks ago on the 10th. But what's in front of you are different categories within the general fund. In the top section, Fund 10, that's our largest area within our chart of accounts. And then other funds that we have within our area, our capital trust. We have some money reserved from the Barton Elementary sale. We have some student activity accounts. Fund 80, even our community services fund, we have a little bit of money retained there. Be happy to entertain any other questions or comments.
And you can, sorry, again, can you remind me, when we allocate funds this way, is that something if in a future year we say, you know what, we changed our mind, we want to move it back? I'm assuming some of these may be restricted, maybe they're all restricted. Can you talk through that?
We do, some of them are required. So as an example about the third line, and I'll try to highlight it here, we are self-funded with our health insurance. And so as we have monies designated as a reserve in case we had a bad year. And by bad year, we collect premiums from both employees as well as the district share, expenditures going out when people have medical treatments, and so if those expenses exceed the premiums we've collected, this is a reserve that's there purposefully to make sure that we have, again, financial stability by being able to offer that. So some of these are required to have based on our current activity and the programs that we offer, but some of them we do have control over. We have not increased the turf fund. So we will be seeing a turf replacement a few years from now. But that's one area. And as we would have foresight of that expenditure, we would either be able to budget that, utilize these, make sure over the next couple of years that we could address that. The one area that's important to point out, and this is that area that I spoke about, and I did want to point this out, we were able to, and again, the spending the last couple of years, and that's why, number one, we've been very frugally spending. The second thing is that our health insurance, again, we're self-funded, so we have control over that. When we don't have those expenditures, that comes returned back to the district, but we were able to increase our unassigned fund balance by approximately $2 million. So the current balance of just over $12 million in that now represents a 13.1% unassigned fund balance, which is healthier than it was previously. We'll be discussing that here shortly around one of the policies around our fund balance, but I did want to point that out because it is a notable area of improvement.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll make a motion to accept the fund balance designations effective July 1st, 2021 for the start of the 21-22 school year as presented.
Second. Motion and second to accept the fund balance designations as presented. Any final discussion? All right, hearing none, I will call the roll. Ms. Schmidt is absent. Ms. Justman? Ms. Dove?
Yes.
Mr.
Ongert?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Swigert votes yes. And Mr. Rebholz?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. And Andy, you also have the next item, quarter two revenues and expenditures in the aggregate for 2021, 2022.
Yeah, thank you, sir. This is something that we report a lot of this information on a monthly basis to you. Quarterly, we present it, have a discussion, formal action. This was one of the areas that we're complimented on, again, with the rating call this last summer, is that financial disclosure and the transparency that we allow. What do we look like this year's budget to actual, and even comparing that then to last year's budget and actual, with any variances. So it allows us to see any areas that we are overperforming, underperforming, based on revenues that are lagging or whatnot. So as I'm looking at this, and I made a note of this, and it's not untypical, but there's no areas of concern. I have this broken out again by revenues in green. I think that's kind of a salmon-y color, which are expenditures. I have it broken out by fund. Our general fund totaling, and it's a balanced budget. We have activity, but you'll note in there that, and this is a really important part, we to date only have approximately $5 million of revenues that we've collected. Very typical. Expenditures of approximately $23 million. This is a great example of that cash flow that we just spoke about, because the money coming in does not always mean money going out. When we make widgets and we sell them and we have a replacement, and keeping a little bit of inventory, similar to what the private sector would see, we don't have that. We're held a little bit captive between what our property tax payments when we receive that money, as well as state aid. So in just shortly after this is when we see very large payments coming in from both of those sources, that when we see the next month, you'll see a big turnaround in that, because typically for just about all districts, December is a very tight month financially. But we have not short-term borrowed because we've been able to build up our fund balance and because people have been spending a little bit more frugally. The other funds that we have, our gift fund, Fund 21, it's actually outperforming just a little bit. Why? Because our students are actually doing more activities than we originally anticipated. They're doing neat stuff. It's clubs and it's group activities and things like that. Fund 27, which is our special education in the middle of the page, I described this. These are all the programs and services for students with individualized education plans. This is what we're providing to them. Again, they have some funding sources. We do transfer a large chunk of money, just short of $9 million of the budget, is from our general fund into this fund to offset it. It has to balance to the penny, but all the anticipated expenditures have been captured. No areas of concern. Head Start, we're one of a few districts in the state that has this as a countywide program that we offer. And again, the grant claim is underway. You see revenues at this point in time. We actually do have a grant claim. We're reconciling at this point in time. We're just a little bit behind over the holidays with some of the other financial information that we've been working on. Very similar to about a $500,000 claim where we were last year, you can see. Fund 38, this is our non-referendum debt. The only expenditure is the interest payment. We're getting towards the end of this payment cycle. So this is the debt that we've been able to enter into without referendum approval, but interest only at this point in time, similar to last year. As well, referendum, you'll see a big change. That was the refunding that we had in July. When I do a budget revision, we'll be reflecting that, but we had to record that as a revenue and an expenditure. But the expenditure is larger. Why? Because we had a fall interest payment, principal only in April. So that will be coming up here a couple months from now. We have our capital expansion trusts here. We have Fund 41, Fund 46, Fund 49. There are monies there. Dave Ross and his team have been spending it, again, as they're wrapping up projects. And it sounds a little bit awkward to say that, but they're still wrapping projects up from the summer, and as we're going in, and he shared with me that he and his team expect to spend the full 1.6, almost $1.7 million for the current year. Fund 50 Nutrition, they're federally funded this year with the USDA free meals for all children. Adults are paying, but again, no variances that we're seeing that are large enough to account for. We do have claims that are underway from the federal government that's just a little bit lagging compared to last year at this point in time, but salaries have perked up compared to last year because we're a little bit better staffed than we were at that point in time. Very excited about that. It's been one of the harder positions to fill, but we're very grateful being able to provide that nutrition to students. Last category in this area, Fund 73, which is our other post-employment benefit trust. So this is our retiree, otherwise known as our pension with health continuation. It is lower because people have been falling off even compared to last year, but this is the first year that there will be a TSA contribution that teachers and other eligible staff could be given that they've earned this spring. So we will see a larger chunk of money in June as it was historically month by month with just health continuation. Last area that we have, our Community Services Fund. I gave a big presentation on this with our annual meeting. It's everything outside of a typical school day. This is our school liaisons, our school resource officers. This is our middle school sports. This is a little bit of our pool activity, but again, anything outside of the typical school day. Trending well. No large variances. Middle school sports are well underway. Payment to the city for the first half of the year was completed earlier in the fall. Last area is our cooperative with our, I believe it's our boys hockey team. And that season is now underway, much like it was last year, and they're incurring expenses, and we're also collecting revenues from other schools as well as ourselves. Happy to answer any questions. I go over this quickly. Hopefully you had a chance to review it. But again, I'd highlight an area if there's a big variance. There are some bigger percentages, but they're low dollar amounts. They're not an area of concern.
Andy, just a question of semantics. So this is the report for Q2.
Correct.
If you go to the top of page 1, Q2 activity, 7/1 to 9/30. Shouldn't that be 12/31?
Yes, it should.
All right, Kurt, we're even.
They've each found a typo for those in the audience. So, yep, correct. Thank you for catching that.
Just got a question on estimate of, so this is second quarter expenditures. Yep. How much do we spend as a percentage of total on wages and benefits in our district?
It's between about 75 and 80%. We're a service-driven organization. We're providing, and that's true of everybody from the teachers to the aides to the custodians to the administrators, but between wages and benefits, it's about 75 to 80%. If you'd like an exact percent, I can get that and include it.
Maybe I was leading towards at least thanking our staff during these trying times, thanking our principals that were here, and thanking our teachers and staff. We have very low turnover. We prioritize our staff and keeping our schools open. So I just want to thank everyone in our organization for doing that. And we obviously want to invest as much as we can in compensating people fairly. So I just thought it's an interesting fact to know just how much we actually spend on our people. And I want to thank them.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I move to accept the 2021-2022 fiscal year, quarter two, revenues and expenditures in the aggregate as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion and second to accept the revenues and expenditures report as presented. Any final discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Rebholz.
Yes.
Mr. Ongert.
Yes.
Mr. Zweigert votes yes. Ms. Schmidt is absent. Ms. Justman.
Yes.
Ms. Dove.
Yes.
And Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Great. That motion carries. Thank you. Andy, thank you as well. Appreciate all your work. As long as we're talking money, let's talk capital projects. Capital projects and budget is the next item on our agenda, and Mr. Dave Ross is here to walk us through that. And this is, I'm assuming, Mr. Ross, is this the same information that we saw at the last meeting?
It is.
Great. Any changes, any updates?
No, we have started to take some bids, just trying to get a jump on things, and like you would expect, things are a little bit more expensive than we anticipated. So There's some construction projects that are on the list here that hopefully will come in a little bit better, but it's just the nature of the beast right now. It just seems to be like anything that we go to purchase was more than it was the last time.
Dave, I do have a question on the softball bleachers, relocating them on the varsity fast pitch field. Can you give us a little insight into what that all entails? Do they need to be dismantled in order to move, or?
No, what the setup with them now is that they're pretty far back from the backstop and there's really poor sight lines. So essentially what we'll be doing is taking the wind tie downs off them. We're going to try to slide them forward, but we're going to have to take some fencing down, add some more blacktop, and just get it a little bit closer so the sight lines are improved, because it's pretty terrible right now.
Okay, and there's 65,000 here is the estimated cost. Is that legit? And just thinking about your comment last meeting about, a lot of this stuff is not benefiting programming in the classroom. It's above the ceiling, behind the walls, and so forth. And I get that the sight lines are bad. We got emails on that last year, but I guess if we're going to spend 65 grand out of the capital budget, that's the place to do it right now?
Right now, I believe it is. We put some dollars into the field itself to really try to improve it and make it a better field than it was, because there was a crown on it and it was a pretty bad field last year. So that's better. We try to put our dollars into different areas just so we have equity amongst the sports and so right now it's time to look at the fast pitch.
Okay, thank you.
The playground equipment that's being replaced, does that take care of the entire playground, or is that just a portion?
That's just a very small portion. Quite oftentimes, PTOs.
That's what I was just going to ask.
It's like any other gift. We take the gift, but then it's ours to maintain afterwards. And most of our playground equipment is 30+ years old, so it's going to be one of those things that it's kind of a recurring theme.
Do our principals work with their PTOs to say, hey, reoccurring, we'd like to get your money? I know there might be a big event that happens at McLean that probably makes some money still.
If you look at our theme for our parent group, it is a project.
So he'll be contributing.
Kurt?
Every day.
You have an item, Kurt?
In more ways than one, yes.
It's just a question. I noticed Cameron still in the office, in the crowd. Thank you, Cameron. There is, just to point out, there's a $220,000 HVAC controls retrofit beginning in the high school.
Right, and that's actually, it's starting this year and continuing through next year. I tried to straddle 2 budget years with it, just because the amount was so large.
And control the heat in all the classrooms, so we recognize some issues. And then, if I put it in context, if you consider all our schools, there's over $20 million worth of even back maintenance and upgrades to do. If you consider what we have to do in the next 10 years, we try to allocate as much money as possible. I know it's not a benefit to the students that are sitting in 50-degree, 60-degree temperatures, but we'll try and fix that for you, Cameron, and your people, and at least there's some budgeted money to do some control work, and hopefully we're looking into it further.
Dave, is that entirely a controls issue, or are there RTUs that need to be updated as well?
Not any rooftop units at the high school, but the high school is a huge plant, and there are, just want to go through it, there's at least 30 air handling units over there, so, and then about 160, 180 VAV boxes associated with it. So we have some issues and 3 different control systems in there now, so we're trying to integrate it into one system.
I move to approve the 2022-2023 capital budget and projects.
Thank you. Motion and second to approve the 22-23 capital budget and projects. Any final discussion? All right, hearing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Ongert?
Yes.
Ms. Justman?
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt is absent. Mr. Swigert votes yes. Mr. Rebholz?
Yes.
Ms. Dove?
Yes.
And Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Great, thank you. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work and your presentation. We appreciate it, Dave. We are on then to the technology projects and budget, and Mr. Tim Harder is going to walk us through that. And Mr. Harder, I'll probably ask, I'm going to ask the same questions as I did. Is the information that we received the same as what you presented last time?
It is. So the projects are all the same. Some of our projects, similar to Dave, are already out to bid. So pending approval by the board, we'll start that process. Our biggest issue is not just cost, it's availability of items. We can continue to have a concern if we'll have our Chromebooks on time at the start of the school year, along with some of the different network pieces on there. So we'd love the opportunity to get started on these projects now.
Any questions, any discussion? Ms. Justman stepped out, but I think we still have enough here for a quorum if we wish to proceed.
I would move to approve the Technology Department budget, project list and associated budgeted costs for the 2022-23 school year.
I'll second that. We have a motion and second to approve the Technology Department project list and associated budget for 22-23. Any final discussion? All right, hearing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Zweigert votes yes. Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Dove?
Yes.
Ms. Schmidt is absent. Mr. Rebholz?
Yes.
Ms. Justman is absent, and Mr. Ongert.
Yes.
Great, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. And the next item is K-8 literacy, and I believe Dr. Rice is here to walk us through that. Good evening, Dr. Rice. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. Again, so this information is what was presented before, so it's nothing new. It is this set of resources, so it's the K-8 resources for teachers, and that's the top set of those 4 resources, and then the bottom set is for teachers and for students. And so it's a varied set of resources. We've had several presentations. We've met with the board curriculum committee, and I'm just honored to bring these resources forward to support our students and our staff.
Great. Any questions? Can you summarize for us? I know that we went to, I'm going to say extraordinary lengths, but I don't think it was extraordinary lengths. As it relates to giving the public the opportunity to participate, I'm assuming it was at all the curriculum committee meetings, resources were available in multiple locations. Can you just walk through that a bit for the community?
Absolutely. So we had the resources available at the library for a week. We had the resources also available back here at the district building for a week. We offered nighttime sessions and weekend sessions for people. And then we also offered opportunities by appointment. We had a Google form that people put feedback on. We did receive 3 different sets of feedback. 2 that were very pro the Fontes and Pinnell resources, 1 that had concern about the Fontes and Pinnell resources. Part of it goes back to something called Ed Reports, which rates and ranks all kinds of curricular resources. And then included in that is Fontes and Pinnell's response to the Ed Reports. So overall, in total, it was 3 responses.
I just have a personal comment from being a remedial reader in 7th grade. I was pulled out of class to get more help. I needed more help. And I did catch a spelling or a typo today, so that's adding some levity to that. I thank my remedial reading interventionist.
Excellent.
In 7th grade, so I'm supporting this. I love what we're doing and the focus that you're bringing to this, and I know it's an important teaching element for our kids to be successful. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, it's an honor to bring in these resources to support the students.
Could I echo that? And I just want to thank all the people who are involved in this. First of all, those on the curriculum committee, and thank you to our chairperson, Erin Dove, for that, and all the people who were involved, and for honoring the process, because I know sometimes the process can be clunky, but we have the process for a good reason, and it's to help with the transparency with our community, and I think we hit a home run there. I mean, clearly there was a lot of opportunity, and thank you to the community members who participated in that and shared their comments.
Also, there were approximately 50 staff members, including our literacy coordinator, teachers, some principals that participated in helping write units of study along the way and doing a lot of the research with the model and things like that. So there's been a lot of hands in this, and it's been a good process. It's been good learning for all of us, and it's good to bring these resources forward.
Right, I'm glad you mentioned that. Thanks to those individuals as well. Erin?
Chris, I just wanted to echo, what you and Dr. Reese said. I know teachers have been working really diligently on our literacy program for a couple years now, and I'm happy that this is a first kind of step into initiating that, and I'm excited to see where the units of study take us, and thank you to all those teachers that were involved.
Thank you, Erin. Any other discussion? Any other questions? All right, hearing none, I would move to approve the K through 8 literacy primary instructional resources.
I second that.
Thank you, Kurt. Motion and second to approve the K through 8 literacy primary instructional resources. Any final discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Ongert?
Yes.
Ms. Justman? Yes. Ms. Schmidt is absent. Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Dove?
Yes.
Mr. Rebholz?
Yes.
Mr. Swigert votes yes. That motion carries. Thank you again for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. That concludes our action items. So on to our future agenda items. First of all, any items for follow-up and communication? Anything that at this point the board would like brought to a future agenda? And of course, if you think of something after the meeting, please reach out to me or to Superintendent Wimmer. Any items? Okay, hearing none, our next item is the board meeting calendar. And so we have a number of meetings upcoming. I believe the first one is tomorrow, correct? Today's the 24th, tomorrow's the 25th. The policy committee will meet tomorrow at 4 p.m. right here in the Education Service Center. And the curriculum committee meeting takes place on February 4th here at the ESC. Then we have regular board meetings scheduled for February 7 and February 21, also here at the ESC. And then in March, our first board meeting will take place on March 7, 5:30 p.m. here at the ESC. So I think I have all those set, and of course there are links on our website for all the upcoming meetings. All right, is there anything else to be brought up at this time? We've reached the end of our planned agenda, so I would move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kurt. Motion and second to adjourn. Any final discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Ongert?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Justman?
Yes.
Mr. Rebholz?
Yes.
Mr. Swigert votes yes. Ms. Schmidt is absent. And Ms. Dove?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion to adjourn carries. Appreciate everyone's attendance here in person and virtually. Have a good evening.
Four minutes.